Hey folks, my name is Justin, and I have a simple question for you. How is your work used? Think about that. How is your work used? Now, you may be thinking about your reader as someone who's just sitting at home, reading on a tablet or paper, and just being personally edified by the content that you're producing. But sometimes that individual who's reading your work is actually sitting in a corporate environment, and they're part of a team. And I wonder if these slides are advancing. There we go. Maybe the work that you're producing, that they're reading, is informing a discussion, informing a debate, informing a decision that's being made by a corporate entity or an organizational unit larger than one person. Maybe large amounts of money are being thrown around because of what you're doing, and maybe there's a real impact on the ground all over the world. So I work for Google Ideas, and I've spent the last few years running around talking to a lot of different folks, trying to understand how this ecosystem fits together. And I've learned, for example, that big business makes huge use of journalism. If they're going to build a factory somewhere, they need to know, is the regulatory environment good or bad? And they leverage your work to get an understanding of the facts on the ground. Banks have to do anti-money laundering compliance. Often they'll search for a name of a customer on Google or elsewhere, and they'll see if any journalists have written stuff about the customer. They're leveraging your work, and they're using that to make sure that they're not accidentally laundering money. Law firms as well. Sometimes your work is cited in court. Often it's not cited, but it's still driving a legal process that could have a huge impact. And finally, in government, we can also see that policymakers all over the world will say that your work is the single most impactful input into the policy process. Whole laws get changed, sometimes very quickly, because a single story gets published. So this is a huge impact that the journalism community is driving. But who is funding this impact? So I did a little bit of sort of envelope math. This is not real data that you're about to see. This is just my conjecture. But trying to understand who's investing resources versus who's realizing impact and value from journalism. So you can see that the general public is putting in a lot of money. Donors, to some extent, are putting in money as well. But government, law, and big business are all deriving massive value from journalism. And again, this is not real data, but hopefully it makes the point. If you talk about donors as well, donors have their own agendas, their own objectives. I say this as an occasional donor. We're not necessarily always aligned with impact either. So the whole thing is a little bit of a headache, and it's a kind of a messy situation. If your goal is to really help the journalism community realize its impact, you might wonder, like, what are examples that are success stories? What are models that have been used all over the world that align the impact and the investment a little bit more closely? So the Economist Intelligence Unit is one example, right? The Economist has the in-house expertise, and they work directly with big business to try to capture the economic value that they're going to be creating. Another example from right here in Europe is, this is an old version of the deck. Imagine that says Blendl, where they have basically sort of a per article transaction model where you are supporting the journalism that you read and find worthwhile. Not just what you read, but actually that you think is worth supporting. ProPublica has a data store where they sell their data at one price to academics, a different price to journalists. They're price discriminating based on ability to pay. So these are three models that are already being used every day in the wild. But are there even bigger ideas? Are there crazy ideas? Let me throw out a few. These are just meant to start a conversation. So don't be alarmed if they sound alarming. So the first idea, what if any government entity that used journalism to drive an impact had to send the journalist a letter? And the journalist could publish the letter, they could share it with donors, they could keep it private, they could do whatever they wanted, but they would know the impact of their work. And you could pass a law that would require government entities to do that. Another crazy idea, what if there was an annual list of the Fortune 100 companies who is getting value from journalism, who is supporting journalism, based on their business model, right? And you would have to have a third party do that. There'd be some complexity, but maybe it could work. Third idea, in the US, we have these laws called qui tam laws, where whistleblowers can collect some of the money they save the government. Could models like that support journalism that's having this impact and saving a lot of people a lot of money? I don't know the answer to these questions. These are some of the organizations that I know in the US, I know there are many in Europe as well, who could potentially be partners in thinking through how to make this work. And you don't necessarily want to reward an individual article, maybe you want to reward a community, so some of those guys could help. But at the end of the day, hopefully we can create more feedback loops and more cycles where impactful work is rewarded and leads to more impact over time. Thank you.